Hello everyone and welcome to an incredible game that just finished from the anti-penultimate round of the UzChess 2025. Nodirbek Abdusattorov versus Parham Maghsoodloo, and Nodirbek was leading the tournament and he still sort of is, but he has his first loss that we've covered yesterday. He lost to the other Nodirbek, and it was a grueling game, 136 moves, where he was fighting rook versus rook and bishop, and he almost managed to hold for 50 moves to get a draw, but then Nodirbek outplayed him. Parham, on the other hand, he's also co-leading the tournament with Nodirbek and Arjun going into round 7, but he's undefeated. He's extremely strong, and well, if you've seen Parham play, you know that it's never going to be a quiet game. And this most certainly is not, and especially with Nodirbek coming off of a loss, I knew that we could be expecting a great fight here. I tuned into the live stream at move 12, I believe. After that, queen to d2 was played, and I already knew that this is the game that I would be covering, and I already made my interface and everything, since I knew that this was going to be the game, and I was not wrong. So let's check it out. Nodirbek with white opens with pawn to e4. We have pawn to c5. Parham goes for the Sicilian defense. He's a fighter. He always wants to fight. It doesn't matter even if a loss would get him first place in a tournament, he will fight. If he needs a draw, he will fight. So knight f3, we have pawn to e6, the sort of the French Sicilian. d4, we have captures, and knight to c6, the Taimanov variation. Knight to c3 and the Bastrikov variation of the Taimanov. Queen to c7, where usually we will see bishop e3, bishop e2, sometimes f3, not so much f3, but we've seen it. You could go f4, also g3, you could bring a knight to b5. Even this knight to b5 has been played, so really, like against any Sicilian, you can play pretty much any move and it has a name. But here we have queen to d3. It is not extremely rare, but fairly rare, and the queen is very tricky on d3. It seems like you could capture on d4 and sort of make white waste a tempo, but you know, positioning white's queen on d4 at the cost of a tempo, that's not bad at all for white. So also you have to be very careful, you know, if the knight now coming to b5 is any dangerous, the queen now has access to the entire third rank. So it's you have to be careful. And also we could check out the situation on the clock. Parham played pawn to a6 right away, and knight b4 you can just go queen e2. If black wastes a tempo, then white can waste a tempo. It's not a problem. You're gonna kick away the knight, bring the bishop in, well, probably to g5 or e3, castle queen side, and everything is perfectly fine. But here we have pawn to a6, and Parham did spend 13 minutes on this move, so it's hard to say when's. Of course, he knows about queen d3. It's just a matter of when was the last time he looked at it. So okay, knight captures on c6, and now b captures does seem to be the most appropriate reply, and then you can strike with d5. But no, Parham goes queen captures on c5. This is probably what he was calculating when he was spending those 13 minutes on this pawn to a6 move, that he will confuse Nodirbek with queen to c6. But okay, we have bishop to f4. Nodirbek spent some 8 minutes, so I would say he definitely was a little bit confused. And there is a game where b5 was played, but here we have knight to e7, and it is now as of move 8 that we have a completely new game. And this is just, you know, to what length these guys will go to surprise each other, you know. So they cannot rely on memory. They have to start playing a game as soon as possible. And okay, we have knight e7 and castles queenside by Nodirbek. We have pawn to b5, preparing bishop b7, rook c8, pawn to b4, the usual stuff, and pawn to h4. This is by far the best move, and you will see why very soon. Bishop to b7, we have pawn to h5, in the style of AlphaZero and many, you know, human players before AlphaZero who just pushed the h-pawn and everyone looked at them like they were weirdos, and rook to d8. b4, it's always very hard if you've ever played positions like these, you know, to really pinpoint the moment where b4 is a good move and where, you know, you should prepare it a little bit. So here it can be played. It's the top move recommended by the engine, but it's hard to, for example, the engine wants b4, knight e2, and then rook to d8, which also makes sense, but it's not something that you're used to, you know, playing as a human. So first we have rook to d8, and now after queen to d4, also one of the reasons why probably the engine prefers pawn to b4 by playing queen to d4. Nodirbek beautifully centralizes his queen, and he stops pawn to b4. It seems like maybe you could play it and then something like knight d5, you know, with knight captures on c3, but captures and your queen is also hanging, so it's not nothing really. So after queen d4, pawn to f6, and bishop to d6, just grabbing more space, now stopping the advancement of the d pawn. Knight to c8 going after the bishop, and we have a trade of dark square bishops. Bishop captures, rook captures on f8, and rook to h3, just nicely gaining control over the third rank. Also, the rook will not be, you know, lost on h1 at some point due to a blunder. Plus, you're defending that knight on c3, so it's a useful move. You can, you know, go after the g7 pawn. You could triple up on the d file with rook d3. So many potential uses for this rook. We have queen to b6, offering a queen trade, and queen to d2. So maybe even around this point, I don't know, it was the moment where I think around queen d2 was the moment that I decided that I will be covering this game. Because, you know, if you look at it, what is this? What is this? There's a pawn on h5 already. I mean, it looks like a game that I'll be covering. And here bishop to c6 was played. It looks like a very odd move, but the point is that if you try to artificially castle right away, let's say h6, g6, and now you go rook to d3, you triple up on the d file, bishop to c6 will be played. So I think Parham just played it, and you can see how much time he spent. 46. He had 46 minutes, drops all the way down to 19 minutes, so almost half an hour. And yeah, it makes sense. You will defend at some point. You might be able to hide the king over on the king side. The question is how safe the king will be at all, because this pawn will be coming to h6. But okay, you have to be flexible. And the position is still manageable. We have rook to e1. And this is the sign of a great attacker. Someone would just triple up on the d file and, you know, just feel good about themselves. But no, Nodirbek realizes that perhaps there's more to be done here. And he brings the rook to e1 to align it with the black king. And we all know what's coming. I mean, this is the black played the Sicilian, so we know that knight to d5 is white's next move, pretty much regardless of what black plays. So here we have queen to c5. And knight to d5, and you could capture it. It's not that big of a deal. The king will come to f7 either way. For example, captures, you will move the queen, or even bishop to d3, you go after the pawn. And if king to g8, you will move the queen, offer a queen trade. And after captures and captures, yes, the material is equal, but it's a bishop versus a knight with play on both sides of the board. The bishop is a much better piece here. Also, the knight can never move, otherwise you get rook e7. So this would be a very slow and painful death for Parham. So again, he chooses to wait, king f7, and now knight to b4. Okay, putting pressure on the a6 pawn, but also, you know, rook to c3 might be tricky in some lines, maybe if you defend the knight first. So bishop to b7, getting the bishop out of harm's way, and pawn to h6 now. We have pawn to g6 and pawn to e5, just, you know, going all out. No reverse gear, Nodirbek. King to g8, and now knight to d3. Attacking the queen, we have queen to d4, and just pawn to g3. So nothing, no problems there. We have knight to b6, trying to basically saying I'm perfectly fine here. The knight is coming to a4 or c4. I will have pressure on your king. I've defended, and now it's my turn to attack. The situation on the clock also very similar. 16 minutes versus 11 minutes. This is, I mean, white controlling more space, it's definitely easier for white to find moves, but still it's a tricky position. We have rook to h4. Again, just winning more space. The queen has to move. We have queen to d5, and now pawn to b3. Stopping queen captures on a2, but also nicely controlling the knight from coming to a4 or c4. We have rook to c8. And now e captures on f6. Rook captures on f6, and now pawn to c3. Again, looks very nice, but very hard for Parham to make a move. And here Parham played pawn to d6. He spent only 3 minutes. I guess he didn't want to invest more time, not to drop too low. But with this move, he blundered the game. The only way to play this is to go queen to d6, to put pressure with queen a3, and then after this is prevented, now you go rook c4. a very tricky move, but you make use of the king being on b2, so if the pawn is captured, you will have knight captures, you fork the king and the queen, and white will have to struggle very hard and find pawn to f4 to keep some sort of an initiative going, but still, it is manageable. However, after c3, Parham played pawn to d6, and he missed something. It's very obvious when you point it out, but, you know, when you're actually playing, not so much. So have at it. Feel free to pause the video and what did Parham miss here? While I give you a couple of seconds. So Parham missed that the e6 pawn can no longer be defended, and Nodirbek played bishop to h3. And that's the problem. It can be defended. You can play it with rook to e8, but still, sorry, not rook to d8. You can play it with rook to e8, but it's not as impressive. This rook will come to f4, threatening the rook on f4. And now if you capture it, then the queen comes to f4, and the dark square weaknesses are now fully apparent. Queen f6, queen to g7. One threat, if you go, for example, rook to f8, you can play bishop captures on e6, even though the queen is attacking that rook, and then after, let's say, queen captures on e6, rook captures, you will capture on f4, but now knight captures, and I mean, that king is just in a terrible spot, and this will be an easily winning endgame for white. So instead, after bishop to h3, g5 was played, and now we have rook to h5. Now, okay, this is the last big line I'm going to show because I know how much you guys appreciate them, but a rook to h5 is a fine move, and very hard to defend against it. I will just show you an instant knockout, but it's a disgusting engine line, so of course, you know, no... why would you play that if you also find the other line? But I will show it because I know how much you guys love it. So you attack e6 pawn 3 times, and once black defends it, this is the only way to defend it, now you just capture. And you might be thinking, well, what is this? Are we not just giving up a free piece? Yes, but for very good reason. Rook captures on e6, rook captures, bishop captures with check, queen captures, and now you capture on g5 with check. And there are, you know, many ways you can win material here. You could go queen d8 check, pick up the knight, but if queen g6, you could play that, for example, queen to d8, and after king to f7, you can't capture right away due to queen captures on d3, but you can play knight f4, and now after the queen moves, or, you know, whatever, queen to c7 with check, and now you will either capture the bishop or the knight, depending on what black plays. If queen to e7, you will capture on b6, and of course, you're completely winning. You're up 2 pawns. Your king is more safe than the black king on f7. So this is one way to do it. But, you know, as everything is really good, it's hard to decide which is better. Rook h5 seems very more human, going after the g5 pawn, and now we have king to h8. King to f8 is a little bit better, but Parham decided that the king might be more safe on h8, and also he's down to 2.5 minutes on the clock. Rook captures on g5, attacks the queen. We have rook captures on c3 with check, trying to get queen capture, so queen captures on g5, even though even this is winning. But Nodirbek goes king to b2. We have queen captures on d3, and now queen captures on c3, saying that the f6 rook is next unless you trade queens. So Parham trades. We have queen captures, king captures, and knight d5 check. King to d2. We have pawn to e5, and now rook to g7. Bishop to c6. Again, the bishop returns to its original square. Rook to c1 attacks the bishop, and knight to b4. It's a very tricky way of defending, because why would you allow a3 and then rook captures on c6? But Parham has something in mind. We have pawn to a3, rook captures on f2. Now, okay, if you go to c3, then knight a2 check picks up the rook. That would be a terrible mistake. But king to e3 attacks the rook, and now just rook to c2. And not a lot can go wrong for you here, because, well, your position is just excellent, but there is one particularly beautiful way of finishing the game. So feel free to pause the video and find the cleanest and fastest way to win while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who decided to go for a captures on b4, that's also perfectly fine. That's also mate in 6. Although, you know, to our human mind, it seems a little bit unnecessary, because you have bishop to e6. And that's it. Now black can just play some, you know, moves that don't really make sense, as rook to g8 will be checkmate. And that's all there is to it. After bishop to e6, he was in this position on move 39 that Parham Maghsoodloo resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. And okay, you could play something like knight to d5 to give a check, and you could even, you know, play this, something like captures, but then after rook captures, I mean, look at this, sort of 2 rooks versus a bishop, and also you're gonna get checkmated next. You could be annoying with bishop to e6, but we're not gonna discuss such moves on this channel. So yeah, beautifully played by Nodirbek. I had a hunch that this would happen. Not necessarily that Nodirbek would be victorious, because Parham is also just a monster. This is the first game he loses in this event. But Nodirbek overtakes the lead. He's now on 5 points, and we'll see what happens in the other games. If there will be a nice one from this round, we're also going to cover it. But yeah, I knew it was going to happen. Parham always fights, Nodirbek always fights, and when you get, you know, two guys that really want to fight, especially one undefeated and one, I'm probably furious about yesterday's loss. This is the game that you get, and I sort of had a feeling that that would happen. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see what happens in the other rounds, and I'm going to cover some other games as well. I would like to thank Torkel Stenquist, Felix Steinel, Sehadri Subramanian, Andrei Shrada, and James Anderson for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.